Welcome to the Joy and Justice Podcast, an extension of the Standing in the Gap Fund. This podcast takes you behind the scenes of stories too many families know. The loss of a loved one to violence, the fight for justice, and the search for healing. In this first episode, we go back to the night that changed everything. The night my sister Kim called me to tell me that her best friend, Ajike AJ Owens, had been murdered. That phone call set everything in motion. One of my next calls was to Nakan. He didn't hesitate. He got on a flight. He came to Florida, and he stood beside me as we tried to make sense of what had happened. It was grief that brought us together that night, but love and purpose that have kept us together ever since. Today, I'm joined by the two people who were there from the very moment my sister, Kim, and Nakan. Together, we're going to revisit the call, the moment everything changed, and the beginning of what would become a movement for justice and care. First, my brother and cousin, Nakan Kwantu. Nakan has worked for over 2 decades as a multimedia film and animation producer. He's produced documentaries such as Loudoun County, The Road to Black Power, and, of course, The Perfect Neighbor. Before his film work, Nakan produced animation for Washingtonia on Comedy Central and Our Cartoon President for Showtime. He's also worked for Sesame Workshop, Late Night Cartoons, and Flickr Lab, and served as an animation producer for Whoopi Goldberg Presents Mom Mabley and TED Talks live short Unconscious Bias. But beyond all of that, he's my family, someone who showed up for me, got on the plane, and stood in the gap when I needed him the most. Next is my baby sister, Kimberly Robinson Jones. Kim lives in Ocala, Florida, and is the mother of 3. She founded Kimmy's Cakes and is a master baker. She also owns House of Flora, an event production company. She was one of AJ's closest friends, and she received the call that night that changed everything. Her presence that night and every day since is a reminder that love is action. Welcome to the podcast, and I'm really happy to spend this time and share this space with you. To get started and to ground all of us, Kimberly, can you talk a little bit about when you first met Ajike and about your friendship and sisterhood?
I met Ajike actually at a party for my pastor at the time. And I can remember she came in with Isaac, and he had to be no more than like 2. And then Izzy was an infant. And I can remember her carrying him in his infant carrier, at the time, and just seeing this beautiful baby. And then then we were in, her and I were in a sister group together. And we just kind of connected from there, from the group. And our friendship just blossomed from there. So eventually she had her daughter, Africa, who is my goddaughter. And we just, got even closer and, from there. But me and Ajike would literally be on the phone like every morning. She's getting the kids together, taking them to school. I'm hearing her, fuss with him. Come on, let's go, get ready. Like every morning we would be, on the phone. Just it's what her day was gonna be like. I gotta go here and I gotta go, do this and I gotta do that. And I'm like, girl, like take it one day at a time. Slow down. She's like, how am I gonna do this? And I'm like, okay, we got you. But her and I were it was like almost like a little sister type relationship too. She would call me for, advice, Kim, what do I need to do? How do I do this? And I would give her, that grounding. I remember her calling me because she wants to really learn how to cook. And she's like, Kim, how do I make, like you make
you are the chef.
Yes. You make your chicken breast so good. Like, how do I do chicken breasts? And, I'm teaching her how to, to make chicken breasts and, things of that nature. So we just had this just really sister type friendship, together.
Can I ask you, where was Ajika living at that time?
So at the time that I met her?
Yeah, because she wasn't living at the
At the
area
No,
apartment,
at
yeah.
the right?
and no, she wasn't living at the apartment that she lived at before she passed. So she actually was living. I was living in the apartment that
Right.
Ajika lived in when she passed away, and she was living around the corner at a
Oh,
different apartment. Same
in that
neighborhood,
same neighborhood.
same
Yeah.
neighborhood, different apartment. So that's how we really connected because she lived down the road from me. So I would
Nice.
literally get the kids and stuff like that. So she
Right.
was she was right around the corner for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember the last time I saw Ajika was your 40th birthday. So I love that I have my last memory of her is at a celebration
Hmm.
celebrating you. But can you talk a little bit about when you got the call and when we spoke the night after everything happened?
Um, I remember that call like it was yesterday. Excuse me. Tarlisa, which is actually Ajika's her best friend. Also, she called me at it had been like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. And I actually did not know until actually later on one of my other girlfriends called me, but I was like in a dead sleep. And she called to tell me, what had happened. And I was just sleep, and I guess she didn't want to wake me up out of my sleep and kind of like have me in a panic. But then Ajika called me. I mean, not Ajika, Tarlisa called me with one of our other friends, Joy, and let me know what had happened. And when she was saying it to me, like I was just thinking that she was shot. Like where is she? Like I needed to get to her, get to the hospital. And then they told me that she didn't make it, and it was just like my heart stopped.
Yeah.
Um, get
Did you understand what the conflict was at that time, or did like
Yeah, did you understand the circumstances?
I didn't really understand the circumstances. I was like, like what happened. I'm asking like what happened, what transpired,
yeah,
and because I'm thinking that they said that she was shot at first. So I'm like, oh, okay, she shot. Like, okay, we got to go to the hospital, or whatever. And then like I was kind of getting some more, details. Um, but even I was just it really just wasn't making sense to me at that time. I was like, what,
Yes.
yeah,
why,
Yeah.
you
Yeah. It's
know,
a lot to it was a lot to it's still a lot to comprehend, right? Like it
mm,
still doesn't make a lot of sense. And then, I remember I got the call from you and mommy. It must have been about 5 o'clock in the morning.
mm,
My time. I was in, home at Kingston, Jamaica, and so I got that call from you all. And I remember mommy calling because
she called first.
you could barely talk about it.
Hmm.
And I remember, do you remember what I asked you though?
I do. I remember that because everything from the whole situation, everything is like bits and pieces in my brain right now.
right,
It's crazy how the brain works and operates, how it shuts some stuff out. Like, but I do remember getting that call, and I think you FaceTime me.
Mm-hmm.
I think we were on
mm,
FaceTime, and Takima asked me, "Do I need to make that call?" And all I can do was shake my head, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that. I knew my big sister like had
yeah,
me from there.
yeah,
That this wasn't just gonna. We weren't gonna just let this be just another
Yeah.
statistic, another
hmm
just
Yeah.
a story that's not being told. Like, yeah.
Yeah. No, I was really grateful. I mean, I was grateful to be able to make the phone calls. I was grateful to folks, like my good sister Latasha Brown, who picked up immediately and started activating folks, Ben Crump, who came on to represent us. He also, I think within an hour or two was on the phone, and in touch and trying to activate Anthony Thomas, who
hmm
eventually became the family attorney and represented the family in the matter. And so, yeah, I think it was incredible just to see how quickly, folks were
Activated.
activated
Yeah.
and on the scene. And I was just so appreciative of that. I also just remember how crazy it was that there was no local news.
Right.
at that point. There was no
Right.
local news. And then I also remember, you all were trying to get information, basic information about like where's her body, etc.
I literally had to make all of those phone calls. So just to back up to that night and that morning, after talking to Tarlisa, getting Miss Pam's number, because I couldn't rest until Pam hit the ground.
Right.
I know she didn't have much family here, and I'm like, no, she's coming to my house. I know that was her plan, but my plan was no, she's coming to my house. And when I finally got her and she, got to my house and we started making phone calls, I mean, I had to find out where her body was.
Mhm.
I'm trying to track down detectives. I got a call from a detective and said that basically they don't work on the weekends.
Yeah, that was crazy.
That was like the most just stab me in the heart type conversation. Like, what do you mean? We have to wait until Monday to find out anything.
Yeah.
That was like the longest weekend of my life.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
waiting for
So,
answers.
I mean, yeah. When I think about we don't work on the weekends, I'm like, wait, so everybody schedules life around what
Right,
does
around the
that mean?
police's schedule and the detective schedule. I mean, but it was just so it felt so just like
Cold.
cold. It felt
Yeah.
really, really cold at that point. And I was just flabbergasted the fact that there was no local news coverage,
Yeah.
even, right? That like this wasn't a big conversation, that this hadn't broke open, even national news. So Kim,
Mm.
we get from that Saturday, you and I speak, Pam comes to your house, the children are there with you. And I'm trying to support from Jamaica. And we know we've contacted Ben Crump. Anthony is on the scene. And as it happens in these cases, a press conference was being
Mm-hmm.
organized specifically because at that point Susan wasn't arrested,
Arrested.
right?
Mm-hmm.
She wasn't
That's
arrested
right.
the night, she was detained the night of, but then she was allowed to return to her home.
Hmm.
And then the community was setting up like informal, little vigils and things like that. Susan was removing that stuff and throwing it in the trash, and so there was a lot of folks that were just really upset because, again, the response that we were getting from law enforcement, et cetera, was not okay. Was not okay in this situation.
Mm-hmm.
Susan being allowed to return to her home when Ajika lost her life, like that wasn't cool. And so, you know, what was it like that Wednesday? I think it was that Tuesday or Wednesday. It was that Tuesday when the press conference happened, that I ended up having to fly from Jamaica to New York. And then in New York, I had like what is like a 6 or 8 hour layover.
Yeah.
So I
Layover.
ended up going over to see Nakan and Gita. I mean, at that point, I also didn't know what I was walking into or how I could support. And so I was also, just reeling, trying to figure out how to be of support, and ended up with Nakan and Gita. And in those wee hours of the morning, them trying to sort of comfort, console, strategize, we decided that it made sense to have Nakan come with me and document what we were about to walk into. And we literally got off the plane, Nakan and I, and walked straight into the press conference.
We did.
Yeah.
We did. It was funny. Couple of months back, I had to, just kind of refresh in my mind how this all happened and what we were thinking at the time. And I went back and looked at the text messages between Takima and I. And, I guess we spoke on the phone. I think maybe you sent me a text first and then we got on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about it. But when I look at the text, so much we didn't know at that time, right? Like we didn't know what Susan's real name, like we had the name was spelled all crazy, and we was
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
just like some of the facts were a little bit off, and we were just trying to piece together because you were trying to get as much information as you could, just with whatever all the craziness and the madness that was going on, you know. And I remember this one point when you and I spoke. You asked me. You said, well, you didn't necessarily ask me, but you were not sure which your moves were going to be, and you said, you know, I'm thinking that I should go to Florida. And I said, you are going to Florida. You know, I was like, that's not a question. You're definitely going to do that. And you're definitely going to bring your whole bag with you. You
That's
know,
right.
you're going to bring that whole thing. And you were like, okay, we got off the phone. And then, we're texting back and forth. And yeah, and then that's when you
Yeah, and
like
it was crazy that the quickest way to get to Florida from Jamaica was to
was
get to
Go to
go
New
to New
fly
York.
to
York.
New York
Yeah.
to go to Florida. But that was again, I just feel like so much of this has been
I said
blessed by
it's been God.
spirit.
It's been ordained. Like
Right.
Yeah.
this was
Right.
it. It was just the whole circle of how everything happened. I always talk about this to people. I'm like, just with me, my connection with Ajika, and then, me and her being sisters, and then the connections that she had. And, I'm saying, and then, just us being family, like the, just,
Yeah.
I think nothing happens by mistake. We always think,
Right.
the why, but because she said she knew that this was her life was bigger than, what I'm saying, just her being
Mm.
those 4 children's mom, that her life was destined for something greater,
Yeah, it was going to be a big impact.
a big impact.
Hmm.
So Nakan, what was it like when we got on that plane, that Spirit Airlines?
It's funny because there's a lot, there's a lot that's a blur when you talk about like how things are jumbled. Um, I don't even really remember us flying. What I remember was us walking into the press conference, and I remember I had my camera, and I had a GoPro kind of camera, and I was just like, well, I'm gonna just, not to be intrusive, I'm gonna just try to, because we were at the press conference, and I didn't know what the vibe was gonna be, if it would be welcomed, if it was gonna be, I didn't know what was gonna happen, and I think you were up at the front with Pam and with every, Lisi was there, everybody was there, and um, I didn't know what we were walking into. I had no idea, and it's a hard thing to go into a situation and your family member is hurt and devastated, and you don't know exactly what your role is because you want to support, and you're here like because we were gonna document, but but the document was for a purpose, right? It was also to make sure that this doesn't go unchecked, right? Susan
Mm-hmm.
doesn't just get off. And I don't know if when we got down there, I'm always trying to figure this out. If when we got down there, if she was arrested at
She
this
had
time,
not been
she had
arrested.
Had
not
not been
been,
She had
arrested.
she
not
had
been
not been
arrested
arrested, right?
because
So,
part of the demand at that press conference was her arrest.
right, and so like this was all like just kind of crazy for me because I'm like, wait, what do you mean she's not arrested?
Mm-hmm.
And you and I had spoken about it. Well, we were speaking about it, I guess, the whole way on the plane,
Hmm.
and yeah, so that was just like that was what we were going to do, come down there and get as much media on that we controlled,
Hmm.
right? That, because I could see there was a bunch of cameras there, and I don't know what everybody's agenda was, but our agenda was to make sure that we get to put this story out the
Mm-hmm.
way we saw fit, and we get it, and we put that pressure because that was the thing. When we came in, there was so much um, activations around putting pressure. So there was the vigils,
Mm-hmm.
Right.
and then
Some of the protests were,
the protests were going
yeah.
on and stuff. So yeah, just really trying to figure out how to fit into that, and also be in the back so that
Yeah.
I'm not stepping on anything,
Yeah.
you know.
I also want to bring this part up, the children.
Yeah.
Like that was a big part of it, right? There were 4 babies. There were 4 babies, and there was Pam, who at that point had just lost her child and was completely devastated. And then there were 4 children. With Titus was still in pull-ups, right? He
He
Mm-hmm.
was like
was
3 years old. And so you still have four children who were all at your house, Kim, right? Everyone
ground
was
zero.
staying at your house,
Ground zero.
which
That's what we called
Ground
it.
zero.
yeah, so
Mm-hmm.
that sent me into a tizzy because I was like, it just also too, the attention that was starting to come, some of it being negative attention,
Mm-hmm.
death threats,
Mm,
etc.
mm.
And then having to relocate and get them resituated. That was also a big part of the story, Kim. Like, so talk a little bit about just what it was just like to care for the kids in those first couple of days.
I mean, you go into mom mode, you know.
Yeah.
You go into you now have to share a piece of yourself. I'm saying, to these children because they lost their mom. So now I mean, they're already mine. They're my god
Right.
kids or whatever. But it's in a different capacity now.
Yeah.
Now you're really playing the role of a mom. I'm saying they're a mom at that moment. So I mean, I'm cooking, I'm
Cooking
feeding,
breakfast,
I'm
lunch,
lunch,
dinner.
dinner, trying to keep a 3-year-old entertained. I haven't had a 3-year-old around
You're
in a
right.
long time. So and at that time, his needs were a lot greater.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so that then he is now, so we were dealing with those dynamics with him, and trying to make sure he was comfortable, and
Titus,
the
yeah.
with Titus, and then making sure that the kids were just comfortable, that we weren't just trying to keep a normal routine going on.
I never thought about this, but I'm curious. So Pam comes in, right, and you and Lisi and I guess you all have a very regular rapport with the kids,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
With Ajika's children, and Pam is their grandmother, so but she's not day to day, right? She
Mm-hmm.
at that point, she wasn't day to day. Um, was there routines that you like? How did you guys figure out routines with the children and Pam and
Well, it was
Pam?
just the summertime too, so
Right,
it wasn't like we had to have. It was no one was in school, so
Yeah.
we didn't have to
Yeah.
bring people to school and try to do these things. It was just like we just try to make it a normal summer day.
Yeah.
Let's get up and have breakfast. Let's
right,
go
right.
outside and just kind of just they were being kids, playing. And I had my youngest son and my and I think, well, all three of my kids were there at the same time, so
Yeah,
we
they
were
were.
they were trying to keep them occupied and playing basketball and football and just trying to make it seem some type of normalcy,
Yeah,
they were just coming over for
Yeah. Some
a,
level of
a
comfort
comfort, yeah, a family
and
reunion type
yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
So
No, I think it's important because, people just don't know what it's like in those first couple of days and hours and what a family and a community has to do to come together around a devastation like that. There are people who do know this experience,
hmm
unfortunately,
yeah.
but most folks, fortunately, don't. And it's a lot when you have four children who've lost their mom, trying to explain this to them, trying to console them, trying to comfort them, and just sort of making sure things happen. So now we're at the point that we have the press conference. And I want to say it was about a day or two later when the arrest was finally made. I know you received that call with Pam from the sheriff's office, and that definitely brought a lot of relief to
hmm
just know that this was not going to go completely unchecked by law
Hmm.
enforcement.
right,
But initially, the charges remained what, manslaughter, and I think there was an assault charge.
You're right.
right,
And so then we were left dealing with the fact that what we considered to really be murder was being downgraded to
To
manslaughter.
manslaughter.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, so I remember that night how, grateful we were that there was an arrest, but also the level of kind of like disappointment and confusion
Right.
hmm
for how, the police had decided to charge her. Like, what are y'all's reflections on that moment?
Well, I had interviewed Kim around, well, just the whole history, but then also that point. Um, that was really, that was like really hard to deal with for me, watching you and watching, everyone close to Ajika, um, because you are dealing with a loss and in a very tragic way and heinous way, but then also now you're wondering, is there going to be some dignity?
Yeah.
How are you going to deal with this, right?
Some justice.
Some and justice, and I always say, like, there's really no justice at this point, but
Mm-hmm.
yes, so there's the dignity of the system working in some way, right? You want it to do something, and that's really what what I was thinking about with you guys.
I think with us, because once we found out who it was, I mean, because Ajika had already told me about this lady, how she would,
Mm.
call the kids names and, tell them that this is not the Underground Railroad, that, the space that they were playing in. And so when I found out that's who it was, and how much she hated Ajika and already, and how much, I'm saying, she didn't like the kids, and it just, putting two to two together, you're like, this was a setup. This is a setup. And then, you can't shoot anybody through a closed locked door and call it manslaughter. That's just, to
Right.
this day, it's
Yeah.
not manslaughter. It was murder. You knew what you were doing. When the facts came out, and just the whole thing, we knew this is murder. And for them to make those charges, just, I think it was just to appease and try to ease things down, because they didn't want that attention on, Ocala. It was like, yeah, come on now. You got this is all we're gonna get. Like, this is all you guys are gonna get.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, we knew it had been happening for 2 years, right?
Right.
Both you and Pam recall so many conversations that you had with Ajika about, about Susan, and about how she was terrorizing the community. Yeah, and I think that that moment was really upsetting. I think kind of more than anything, it just felt like there was back to the point of like, we don't work on the weekend, that there
Mm.
was just no care,
None.
right?
No
Like there
care.
was no care
Right.
Mm-hmm.
being given from the fact that this mother of 4 children had lost her life in the way in which, the conversations we're having in law enforcement. I mean, I feel like at the very least, her mother deserved an explanation for why you decided it was manslaughter and not murder.
Mm-hmm.
Those things should be explained to people, explained to victims' families.
Hmm.
And I do wish that there was more care in how the family was handled by law enforcement. Eventually, we know that they made it. It was a calculated, strategic decision, knowing where they were filing these charges in Ocala, middle of Florida, what almost like super majority Republican
Mm-hmm.
district. I do think that there was some calculation on what charges would stick, when we eventually did start to engage with the state attorney. I felt like there was, more conversations around their strategy. But I have to say, like, initially that just didn't feel
Initially, it
good
No,
didn't
at
we
feel.
were
all.
It was like, yeah, whatever.
we were
It
livid.
was, yeah.
Yeah, we weren't happy with it. I
Mm-mm.
mean, and also we know, like, her Google search showed, stand
Hmm.
your ground defense, like she owned 2 guns. At one point, it was said that she said one of those guns she bought for AJ. Like all of those things, all those pieces of information really had us confused of why this was not
That
murder
murder,
too.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think the I remember us doing the campaign, change the charge, right?
Yeah.
That was the
Mm-hmm.
we wanted to change the charge, and I think in the end it was the safest,
It was the safest.
Mm-hmm.
to get something.
It was.
Um, we're all aligned in the thinking of, this was intentional. I've reviewed the footage, and we could talk about that later, but the questions that were asked, and the more and more I think about it, I come up with another reason why this was not just intentional, but it was it was
Premeditated.
premeditated.
It
Right.
was
It
planned.
was
You
planned.
know, um, and quite honestly, I don't know. I know it was premeditated, but I don't even know who it was premeditated for. Because in my mind, she made the first call, and we could talk about this. I don't want to jump too far, but that first call was made about children. Was made
Right.
about
The police
Izzy.
were already on their way
Yeah,
based on her calling about the children yet again.
yeah.
Right.
And said she was afraid of her life, afraid for her life because of children.
Children.
So I don't even know. I know it was premeditated, but even worse, I don't know who she was actually.
Well, for me, when she says and Izzy says that she said, "Go get your mother,"
Right.
to me, I'm clear about who
Who it
Right.
was for.
who it was for.
Right.
Right.
So, all right, let's backtrack a little bit and talk about just the efforts in the first couple of days and weeks to try to, increase the charges, to change the charge, but then also those first weeks and moments and working with the community who was organizing on behalf of us. As someone, Kim, who's lived in Ocala, just like what was that experience like? Because again, Nakan and I could jump on a plane and go back home, but
Mm.
this is where you live, you work, where you're raising your family. What was that experience like? I mean, I do feel like the community showed up
Yeah.
and organized, but just like what was that like for you?
I mean, like the whole experience is just surreal because now your face, is on TV, and so people are seeing you and recognizing you, and now you got to kind of be on. I was on my P's and Q's, like, you didn't know what was going to happen. People coming by, driving by your house, and just
Mhm.
the police. There was extra police presence
Yes.
that was outside of
Yes.
my home.
Yes.
They didn't police. They policed the neighborhood, but they didn't police the neighborhood that much.
Yeah.
So it was kind of. I mean, it was scary. Because
I
you don't
remember
know.
being at your house and constantly looking at cars as they went by. Like, what was that car coming by for? And,
Yeah.
Mhm.
you know,
Well, at that point, we had 24-hour security, right? Because there was also death threats that were made.
that's right.
And so, that's part of the story that a lot of people don't know. Not only were there death threats, but there was also literally like a Klan rally that was organized like the weekend after. And what part of Florida was it? It's not the Villages, it's like one of the neighboring.
Yeah, it was somewhere. I want to say not Wildwood, but in that
Yeah, yeah,
in
yeah.
that
But
that
not
era.
but not
Yeah,
far, right?
not
So you're
far.
like you're like literally trying to organize around a dead Black woman's death.
Hmm.
And there's a Klan rally that's publicly being organized.
Right.
You're in, a predominantly, conservative community. You don't know how this community is going to receive people
Mhm.
organizing around that. It was really scary.
Yeah, I mean, I remember one of the vigils that we went to. There was some. I don't know what organization they were, but you can tell that they weren't for us, in that they were they were there, and their presence, and I'm like, you guys, like, it was like, wow, we're mourning someone's death, not, and we're just we want justice.
Yeah.
It was crazy. I mean, but then to see the community, the flip side of that, we saw so
Right.
much community come
Mhm.
together,
Black and white too.
black and white, to come together and really say, this is wrong. Something needs to happen. So that gave me, comfort with all the support that we did have to say, we're
Yeah.
here for you.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, then let's talk a little bit about where we've been since then. I mean, we got off the plane. We thought we were shooting a documentary about the aftermath. And then shortly thereafter, we come across the body cam footage, and the interrogation footage. And Nakan, this is where they say when stuff tragedy happens is when artists get busy.
Yeah.
I know we're going to talk more in another episode about the whole origin story of the film. But it was interesting because we, shortly thereafter, we came across the body cam footage that started to surface in some of the media clips that we were seeing.
Right.
And then we did the official FOIA request for
Right.
it.
Right. So Anthony Thomas, the family's attorney, he did that FOIA request and got the sheriff's department to, um, you know, give up a bunch of police, files, things associated with Susan. And a lot of that information, a lot of the media that we got, some of it, I shouldn't say a lot of it, some of it had absolutely nothing to do with um, Susan's interactions with the community and Ajika, but Anthony having the foresight again to get the charges changed. He wanted to elevate the charges. He wanted context. And so what he did was he asked for anything remotely related to Susan. If she called about she had a cold and she called the police, she called the ambulance. Let me
Mm-hmm.
get that. So we had some stuff. I looked at it and I actually called Anthony and I was like, "Why do we have this? What is this here for? This
Yeah.
don't have anything to do with." And I knew what it was in the back of my head. I knew what it was for. I knew it was for context. And he said it. He said, "This is all for character." What's the word? Anyway, just to show her personality
Her personality,
Right.
character.
yeah,
Mhm.
and the kind of person she was. And so we got this stuff, and really what he wanted us to do was to get clips,
Right. We wanted clips for
clips,
media.
right,
We wanted
Mhm.
clips for media, for national
right,
media, hoping that they would start to look through the
yep,
clips
yep,
and build a bigger story. We thought we were going to work
yep,
with some national media partners to kind of
Right.
get it back out. And at that point, I was working with Anthony to start thinking about DOJ charges.
exactly,
Right. So
Mhm.
this is still the Biden administration. The DOJ under Biden had pressed DOJ charges for Ahmaud Arbery, and
hmm
so we started talking to them, and we were thinking that again, this information, along with maybe like an investigative media piece, right,
hmm
would help us move that along. But then tell me a little bit about, because I didn't look at all the footage like you did, right? So
yeah,
like once you saw the body of the footage.
yeah. So when I watched that footage, I was devastated, um, but it was hard not to continue watching it, and it was about it's over 20 hours of footage. So it's over 20 hours of footage of actual video footage, and then you have audio calls and interviews, and
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, so it was just so it comes out to about 30 hours of material,
Mm-hmm.
um, and it was crazy to watch it all develop,
Yeah,
you know,
unfold.
Mhm.
and unfold, right? So I watch it over a course of some days, and eventually I thought you know that this it took in all honesty, being a filmmaker and being a person who likes to tell stories,
Mm.
it reminded me of a horror story, of a horror story that starts out as something mundane and almost normal,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm.
But there's something that's not quite right,
Right. Yeah.
And the thing that I always equated to is, and in terms of how it played itself out, is like, paranormal activity, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
like this thing that's mundane and real,
Mhm.
but then there's an entity, there's something that is constantly going at this family, something that's constantly going at these people,
Mhm.
and and it has a nefarious intent.
A haint.
And then yeah, right,
A
Right.
spirit.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and then eventually it shows its real intentions.
And real head.
Wow.
It's
Yeah.
Wow, like a
and
poltergeist.
yeah. I
Wow.
mean, yeah, somebody recently said that to me. They
Like a
was like,
poltergeist.
this reminded me of a poltergeist. And so anyway, so having that, I then took that footage to Geeta and was like, I think this is the story.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy. From advocacy to, I don't know, you know, a film on Netflix now.
About advocacy and
Yeah,
about
yeah,
this community and this beautiful woman who in Ajika who was a loving mother um, and was a brave mother.
very
Mm-hmm.
brave.
You
Very
know,
brave.
a brave mother.
Someone asked me, like, like, why would you want to do a film like this? And I said, why wouldn't we want to do a film like
That's right.
this? Why wouldn't we want to show, the Karens of the world that you can't do stuff and just, just get away with it?
Yeah,
You know, you can't just shoot somebody through a closed locked door and don't get arrested until 4 days later. You can't hide behind, stand your ground laws. So yes, that's the reason why we did
yeah.
this. Four children lost their mom, and her story needs to be told. It doesn't just need to be like just a story and it goes away and, oh, we're sorry that happened. No, this needs to be told. And now is in the law books, this case is that this, you can't hide behind this, this law
Yeah.
that we still need to get changed,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
you know?
You know what's so interesting? I remember when Sandra Bland lost her life
That's right.
and how much that affected me.
Mm-hmm.
And it affected me because, again, as a Black woman, I saw myself literally in her. I understood why she was resisting, quote unquote, resisting. She was just asking questions. She was trying to understand because clearly what was happening to her was unfair. And I just remember, like, I always remember Sandra Bland, and I remember, saying to myself and my friends, if something like that ever happened to me, y'all better burn the fucking world down.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I felt. Like, I felt like being your sister and her being your best friend, that was the charge. It was to burn the world down with
Mm-hmm.
whatever resources we have. And I'm so proud. The thing that makes me proudest about this is that we used what we had.
Yeah.
I'm grateful to have a network of amazing friends, activists. I'm grateful to be in a family of powerful artists. I'm
Mm-hmm.
grateful that you are the woman and the mother and the friend that you are. But like literally we didn't have money, but what we had
Was
was
resources.
ourselves and
Mm-hmm.
what we could bring to the table. So I think that's what makes this so powerful for me, right? Like, even the film wasn't something like some big studio came in and financed. We did what we did because it was the right thing to do. And I remember, you talk about, like, I didn't know what to do. Every night I didn't know what to do, and I kept saying to all of us, we just do the next right thing.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, we just have to do the next right thing, and the next right thing led us here.
I, re- I remember just the whole process of, from when it happened until her funeral, you know, um, for myself, Tarlisa and Lisi, and the roles that we played, and that whole piece and those weeks to follow, were just, it was amazing how everybody just fit into their role. There was no egos. There was no, like, I want to do this. Like, it was just, everything just flowed. I had the children and Pam and, and that piece, coming together. And Lisi was behind the scenes, like
Helping
this,
to arrange the
helping to
funeral. She
arrange
did.
the funeral. And Tarlisa was putting together, the parts for the,
That's
of
right.
the funeral, as well. So it was just, it was so many pieces of the puzzle and people, but we all came together so collectively. It just, like, it really just, it melted me, like, gosh, what I'm saying? There was no, well, I want to do this and I want to, it was just, everybody just played their role. Whatever needed to be done was done. And it, and it was just so smooth, how everything just happened. Just behind the scenes.
I remember when you, Lisi, and Tarlisa um, worked out a schedule to who was going to get the kids when and which kids and, get them here and support Pam because Pam is walking into a whirlwind of her.
Mm-hmm.
So she's got to deal with her grief and now she has to deal with these 4 children that, she'd already been in the next stage of her life, and now she has to step in. And I remember turning to Kima at one point, and I was like, this is a lot for Pam.
Yeah, it is.
This is a lot.
Yeah.
She needs a lot of support to deal
Yes.
with this
I remember
thing,
that conversation.
and it was a hard thing to say, right? Because she's dealing with a great big, I don't have the words for it, right?
More than a loss.
Yeah, I can't imagine losing your child in such a way, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now you almost have to swallow that,
Yeah.
and
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, I just remember having that conversation with you, um, and I think people don't think about the ripple effect of how that such an action like that, right? When you
How it affects everybody else
everyone
Yeah.
else,
greatly. Yes.
Yeah.
I watched, when we were gathering footage, we were, and trying to get this media out. I'm trying to manage that, but I'm also watching you all in this space.
Yeah, it was hard.
I didn't know Ajika, but I'm now in this family. I mean, we're family, but in terms of family with Pam and the kids, and
Right. They're now our
they're
family.
now our family, right? In a different way. And how am I gathering media and while this thing is happening?
Yeah.
How do I focus on, like, that doesn't seem as
Important.
important.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's these 4 children that need constant reassurance and
Mm-hmm.
security and love.
And that was why I wanted to start the podcast here, because I think it's so important that the audience understands, the BTS, behind the scenes.
Hmm.
Like, what are
Mm-hmm.
those first hours and days and weeks like when something like this happens? And to make it really real, the
Mm-hmm.
movie is entertainment, right? The movie is on an entertainment
That's
platform.
right.
But what this podcast, this little mini series is about, is really about like making it very real, because we also know that there are people in the audience who have also experienced this.
Yes.
Unfortunately, we're now part of a club of people who have lost loved ones from racial violence. As we get ready to wrap up, I want to ask, because oftentimes we're not necessarily given space to talk about how it's impacted us individually. Digesting 30 hours of that footage, walking through those hours and those days and those weeks. I mean, Nakan, talk a little bit about like just the personal impact on you as a human being, as a father, and as a person just in the world. Like, how did this hit you?
Um, I never watched the footage and don't have a reaction. You know, there was one point we had gone, um, we had been there for the initial when it initially happened, and we decided. I guess there was another vigil.
Yeah.
We had to come. We came back. I think it was in July. I don't remember exactly, but it was
Right, right, right,
right.
right, right.
Um, but it wasn't too far after the initial funeral, and we had come back. Maybe we went to the hearing. Maybe I don't remember, but we came back, and I've been talking to Izzy and realized that he 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 felt responsible, and he felt
Yeah.
He had a lot of he had a lot of
Turmoil.
turmoil going on, and all I wanted to do, I wanted to take the kids with me. You
Yeah, we
know,
all did. Everybody
everybody
wanted
wanted to
to
pick
take the
one.
kids
I take this one, you did
Mhm.
that one. Not to separate them, but to just
just to keep them
just
close
to
to
keep
you.
them. And I was like, I'll take Izzy with me. I'll take Izzy. I was going back to New York, and I said, you know what? I'll if there's an opportunity, if there's something, this can be a way he can just clear his mind. Be the first time he ever took a plane. We'll
Hmm.
go to New York. We'll go to Times Square. We'll have a
Yeah.
time of it, and we won't put a time limit on it. I'll just because like you said, this is the summertime. My kids are older.
Yeah.
Just bring them, and
And also some relief for
for
Pam.
really for everybody.
Yeah.
This is just like a nice.
Yeah.
This could be a break, and we all kind of agreed, and we were like, yeah, let's do it. And it's funny because I had my flight got delayed, and
Mhm.
so I was just sitting at the hotel waiting for the next day to come so I could get it. And um, somebody, I guess Pam, somebody brought Izzy to me, and we went to New York, um, and it was a lot. At first, it was really great. We had a great time. I took
Mhm.
them. We went to playgrounds. We went, like I said, we went to Times Square. We got food. We went to there's this thing called the Little Island. I took them to the Little Island. We went everywhere. We went to the High Line, what I was talking to you about, and it was a great time. And then the reality came back, and it it hit him hard, and in turn then it hit me hard, right? And we had to cut the trip shorter than expected, and it took me the better part of a year and a half to get past that.
Mm.
I felt so guilty, and not to make it about me, but just in terms of the feeling of not being able to successfully to feel like you've done something positive. You
Yeah.
know,
Well, you want to relieve suffering,
You want
you
to
right?
want to
release
Like
some of
you
relieve the
that
want to
suffering.
pain.
relieve the suffering. And so you
Mhm.
want to keep, it's almost like I will continue to pour out until I can relieve the suffering. And there's nothing you can do. And that's part of, I know what impacted me. I remember like I felt the worst when I had to get back on the planes and go back home. I felt like, I wasn't able to continue to be there to support my sister, to support Pam, to support the children. And so, I know we talk about the immediate folks who were immediately impacted, but we're also part of that
Mhm.
circle. And I know it's definitely impacted all of us psychologically. Secondary trauma is real,
Yeah,
is what I'm trying to say.
right.
Mhm.
And I know we're all have carried it in many ways. This work is a reflection of it, right? It is us continuing to try to do what we can do to relieve suffering.
And what's crazy is I've always said that I wanted to be like, do some type of advocacy. When those
Hmm.
Trayvon Martin was right down the road from,
Ocala.
Sanford from Ocala, and when that happened, I wanted to get activated and I wanted to do stuff. And, and you say these things and say, I want to be a part of, but never thinking that this is how you're
I
going to
built a
be
career off of it. I never thought it would be someone that I knew
that you
personally.
know personally. Like this,
Yeah,
I was like, okay, God, this ain't what I meant when I said,
right. Yeah,
this, but this is what happens, and you don't know how this is going to affect you until you're in it. Um, because for me personally, I'll never be the same.
no,
I'll never be the same.
no,
Um, I just the effect that it has had on me, from that day, from that Kim that was from 2 years ago was not the same Kim,
that's right.
and people don't understand that when you take someone's life, it does not just affect them, but it affects everyone that is
Love
around them
them.
that love them. Um, so it really, it has an effect, and it has an effect on you as a mom, because that could have been me. Realizing people don't realize I lived in the same apartment that Ajika lived in
Hmm.
a year, before her. So when I could have been there, and my kids could have been playing. They played in that same field, every day
That's
when
all
we
I
lived.
could think of.
That's all my boys played with the neighborhood kids, and they were in that field playing football. So that could have been me going over there and asking, "Why did you throw a skate at my son? Why did you take his tablet?"
Yeah.
So it just it's greater than just that person being killed. It affects so many people.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, like I said, I want to come back to the part though where, a year and a half later, here we are. And, I know that all of us have had to work through grief and secondary trauma. And I'm really happy that we are family. And we get to call each other family, and we get to call Pam and AJ's babies our family.
No.
We promised. The promise started here.
Mm-hmm.
We promised that we would never leave them, and we haven't.
No.
And she said the world would know her name, and that is our assignment.
Know her name. Yes.
That's our assignment. So thank you all for opening up the series.
Thank you.
We love you.
Love yous.
You ride at dawn.
Yes.
All right. Every story in this series starts with one of those moments: a call, a heartbreak, a decision to act. Through the Joy and Justice podcast, we're lifting up the voices and lessons that came from those moments. To everyone listening, thank you for bearing witness and walking with us. If this conversation moved you, please subscribe, share the podcast, and visit standinginthegapfund.org to learn more and donate. Your support makes it possible for us to stand with families impacted by racial violence and to continue to build a system of care and justice.